Today I'm going to talk about what the Invisible Sensei is, and more importantly, what it isn't. Kia ora, welcome to the Invisible Sensei podcast. My name is Tuari Dawson, and for the last 4.5 decades I have practiced the martial arts in both the indigenous Māori traditions of Aotearoa, my home, and in the wonderful arts of karate, kobudo, and jiu-jitsu. But more than that, I am a fan of all martial arts and martial artists. So here are some of my own thoughts on the subject, as well as interviews with some great sensei and instructors from around the world. And lastly, it's something of a cliche I know, but do me a favour and click the link in the description for our merch shop, as well as other ways to support the podcast. It really does help. Also, check out our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you like what you hear, please share our content. Again, it really helps us to continue to create content we believe in. And remember, it's not what you say when everyone's listening, it's what you practice when no one is watching that makes all the difference. It's amazing how many of these podcasts I do in response to some external stimulus that I've received regarding some elements of the podcast. And today I wanted to talk about what the Invisible Sensei as a concept really means to me. And it's in reference to someone talking to me about the fact that of late I have seen fit to change the logo that I use for the Invisible Sensei. In the beginning it was kind of this black and white thing, and I kind of thought, hey, I'm going to call it the Invisen, which is kind of an odd way of bringing two quite large words down and two quite meaningful words, invisible and sensei. And then I kind of went through the stuff where I'm going to go, right, I'm going to do a big Polynesian guy with all the different sorts of tatau and moko, the skin ink and so on and so forth, and the bald head. And then I had another one in which I kind of did this caricature of myself, and I was in a gi, and again with the ink and so on and so forth. And I had a thought that seems to linger for quite a while. So a person that I'm very, very close with, a very, very close friend, and has known me for well over 30 years, queried me one time about the podcast and about what I do with martial arts and seminars and so on. And he said to me, when are you going to stop hiding? Why do you keep putting yourself behind the curtain? Why don't you step out from behind the curtain? And I kind of had this stock response, and it was, well, humility and this and that. When you have to talk about how humble you are, that really doesn't mean that you're humble. In fact, I think it actually means the reverse. So I had to really stop and think about it. And I spoke to the lovely Te Awa Sensei, and I guess in the beginning I wanted to do things where it was sort of risk-free, in the sense that I was kind of creating this persona, aka the Invisible Sensei, to be this kind of barrier between myself and people who listened to the podcast, basically. And there was a lot of reasons. And initially I called it the Invisible Sensei podcast because the best sensei that I knew, all of them, did stuff in a way that you never saw them doing, really positive stuff. I'm not talking about just physical technique. I'm talking about the ways in which they used to look after their students and their families and their friends, and just the sort of examples that he or she set. And I was really intrigued by that. And so I thought, man, isn't it amazing what sensei do in the background? And it's invisible because they don't talk about it, they just go out and do it, and hence the Invisible Sensei. But I also thought that after a while the notion of being invisible was quite comfortable for me. So whilst I was putting out all these ideas regarding martial arts and interviewing people, it was quite easy for me to kind of hide behind this, not persona as such, but certainly this kind of idea that I didn't have to identify myself or put myself out there in any way where I could actually be seen. And I guess I had a little bit of a change of heart in the last couple of years, in the sense that I'm actually proud of the body of work that I've created with the Invisible Sensei podcast. I am also amazed at the people who listen to it and the friendships that I've made, the opportunities that I've had and continue to have. So I made a choice to be more forthright in the sense where I was putting my actual name to things. I was talking about things which meant a lot to me, particularly around culture and around tradition and around, a whole bunch of things. If you've listened to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. And not to do the kind of podcast where I'm going, what would people like to hear? But I tried to do stuff that I'd want to hear if I was looking for a podcast. So the Invisible Sensei as a concept is really about embracing, I guess, the voice inside you. And that sounds kind of very new agey, but we all have this voice that sometimes in our lives, especially when we're younger, especially when I was younger, that I used to ignore, about doing the right thing. And the right thing oftentimes is not the popular thing, it is not the easy thing, and it's not the quick thing. And you can look at that in regards to training. There were so many dojo out there, and Mick Dojo has kind of entered our lexicon as martial artists. And the worst thing you can be is, people always talk, I don't want to be a Mick Dojo, I want to be this and that and so on and so forth. And to be honest, no matter where you go or what you do, there's always going to be someone who's got something to say about your training. The Invisible Sensei part for me is that what I try to do is be realistic about what I'm teaching, and I try and be realistic about my expectations. And it's been kind of a journey for me to be realistic about my expectations of both myself and other students. So I have this ideal in my mind about what I should be as a sensei. And I'm not it. I'm not it. I don't act like it. I don't train like it. I don't fit that kind of superhero ideal in any way, shape or form. But I guess the point is not to fit. The point is to continue to strive. And my Invisible Sensei oftentimes is quite mean to me and says not very nice things to me, and can tell me that, I know you, why are you doing this, and kind of second guesses. And so the journey is to get past that. I think it's very easy to listen to a negative narrative, especially when it comes from yourself in relation to ourselves. Who am I to stand up in front of this class? Who am I to teach? Who am I to do seminars and so on and so forth? A big part of that and getting over that was creating the Gorju Guys seminar, which I've been able to do with a number of incredible martial artists, namely Sensei Josh Scanlon, Sensei David Redaway, Sensei Derek English, and the guests and the wonderful people that we have. So that's taught me that I have something of value to impart, but I also have a lot to learn, and that I like to create opportunities where we learn together, basically. I think too many times in life we're so focused on patch protection, or the idea that we have this body of knowledge that we must hold closely and guard. And I think that the problem with that is that we forget what's really unique and interesting about our personal approaches. It's us. No one does karate like me. No one does karate or jiu-jitsu or judo or any of the martial arts that you might do like you. We all bring something interesting and rare. So in changing the logo for the Invisible Sensei podcast, it's kind of a reminder to myself that, I have something to contribute. And, you would have heard me talk about a few weeks back. I was very lucky to receive from the Kenfu TV podcast, and please check out their content, a wonderful plaque. And what I do is I have it set up so every time I feel like not doing a podcast, as I'm talking to you now, you can hear my voice changing in volume, I'm turning to look at it. And I have it so it reminds me of what's actually possible, and also that I have friends and colleagues. You guys have heard me talk to Michael Hagen Sensei from the Apex and the Way of the Fist podcast. You've heard me talk to Josh Simmers, Sensei, from the Okinawa Karate podcast, James Pankovic, Steve Arms, Chiketri Sensei, who was recently promoted to 7th Dan, but is this incredible martial artist. These people are not just have not just been people I've interviewed, they've become my friends. And they've become my friends because I've started to see the value in what I do. And I guess to understand that the chieftainship I carry is not in conflict with the chieftainship that others carry, that you carry yourself. And oftentimes we're kind of in this place where we need to put that aside, or we feel we need to put that aside and humble ourselves. I think true humility is knowing what you can and can't do. And martial arts is a wonderful way of learning about that. The Invisible Sensei podcast and the new logo, you'll notice that it's a bald guy with tāmoko on his face. And I don't, it's obviously more, representative than literal, as I don't put my moko out there as much as some others, because I'm always aware of the fact that tattoo artists are out there trying to grab the designs, especially traditional ones that are kind of hard to get and hard to come by. Anyway, enough of that. So the Invisible Sensei podcast for me has become something more than just me rambling. Although you can be forgiven for thinking that's all it is. It's become a conduit by which I've met some wonderful people, and I've had my mind expanded, and I've learnt from incredible people. I've trained with some amazing people, and I have this wonderful network of amazing sensei and senpai all around the world to teach me, to encourage me, and to let me know that we all have an invisible sensei. We just need to take the time and have the courage to listen.